Hello, everyone, and welcome to the W2 Amigos podcast, where we talk about passive investing, real estate, and all the money moves you can make while working your W2 so you can establish your financial freedom. Here to talk about the W2 journey is your host and amigos, Nick Coulter and Xavier Marin. Nick, what's up, man? How you doing today?
Man, I'm doing well. Since we've recorded last, since we had like 4 episodes back to back, got our first booking in our Airbnb over Christmas. Super exciting. We also are going to have to pay probably like $3,000 tomorrow for the tankless water heater in our Redlands investment house, which is not super exciting, but can't complain. I made over like 200 grand on that property since I bought it. So it's not too bad, but it will hurt the pocketbook a little bit tomorrow. But other than that, things been good. You know, just kind of gearing up for the holidays and getting cold and dealing with all that kind of stuff. What about you?
Cute, getting cold. It's like 18 degrees in the morning over here right now. It's actually been snowing for the past 48 hours. So
did you say 48 hours, like 2 days straight?
Yeah, but it's like it's been like maybe 2 to 4 inches, so nothing too crazy. Nothing compared to
Buffalo. That's a lot of snow, you know?
Yeah, Buffalo's about to get like 6 feet within 24 hours this weekend, if you saw that one.
Yeah, that was not looking fun. I think it's like there's one of the running backs is like 5'8", and so they were saying that he was going to be like below the snow line if they just let it sit, which would be funny.
That would be fun. Can you imagine Josh Allen just tossing it? He's just like, all you see is his head and his helmet over the snow.
Yep.
Anyways, I've been good, man. I've been a little busy with some of the commercial stuff. So I had a broker reach out to me last week about a property in Southern California and an opportunity to be able to expand. So did a little bit of legwork, did some due diligence before even thinking about potentially offering anything. And things just didn't check out. It wasn't truly within our buy box. What the seller wanted, we couldn't offer. That's just part of the business. Sometimes you have to just do some of the legwork up front before you even offer anything to see if it's worth going after. So outside of that, man, yeah, everything else has been good.
That's awesome. So today, guys, we wanted to record. It's going to be a little bit different than you've heard recently. We've been doing a lot of interviews, trying to incorporate a lot of different folks into the platform. So today, X and I are bringing some articles that we found interesting that are in the financial space. So wanted to share a little bit of data, wanted to back up some of the claims that we've been making with some actual numbers, which we thought was cool. So we've got 2 articles, kind of homework style. X has one, I have another. And we're going to kind of go into them and talk about the reasons why we wanted to share. So we're a little excited to do that and try to see if this works, because there's a lot changing in the market and there's a lot changing in the job market. So we wanted to make sure we stayed really relevant with you guys and shared our thoughts and opinions on what's going on.
Yeah. And the first article that I'll share, Nick, is, so I was reading the other day that the household income and credit card debt has increased significantly so far this year. And really, when we take a look at the past 10 years, so in Q2 of 2022, household debt is at $16.15 trillion. That is a lot of money. So 10 years ago, around this time frame, we were at about 11.3 trillion. So essentially a 42% increase from where we were at 10 years ago. So that is insane. And some of the things that I was reading through was, one, the rise of inflation, right? It's currently at a 40-year high. The cost of goods, the cost of services. And then also during COVID, what you saw was a lot of government relief. So forbearance with mortgages, forbearance with student loan debt. So what you ended up seeing, right, was either people spending money and or saving a little bit more. So once you start having the government start pulling back on some of the relief funds, and you start combine that with inflation, you definitely start seeing an increase then of credit card debt, because people were used to, getting that relief. People were used to low interest rates for their mortgages. So now you're starting to see the ripple effect of what it's like to, one, spend more money, inflation, cost of goods. So it's interesting to see that $16 trillion right now in the market.
Yeah, I guess I'm surprised 42% in 10 years is a huge number, because, wages haven't matched that, right? So like your wages haven't gone up 42% in that same 10-year span. What I find interesting is I've been thinking about this a lot. Especially when I'm like going around and shopping and stuff. We were in San Diego this last week and we're walking around, and there's so many people out buying things and going to coffee shops and going to breweries. And I see so much happening where I'm like, I know that there is a shrinkage of GDP or whatever you want to call it, recession looming, but it doesn't feel like it. But maybe people are just financing their lifestyle on a credit card versus being able to pay for it with their own cash, which I find really interesting, because I had a theory that when these household goods expenses go up, it's going to hurt everybody because there's like a couple essentials, right? You need to get gas. You have to have gas in your car because like a majority of us commute every single day for our job. You have to have food. And you have to have shelter. And rents have been going on a crazy increase. Housing is super expensive. Yes, prices have gone down a little bit, but you have the interest rates to well more than make up for it. Food is super expensive. Dude, I've been spending so much more money at the grocery store. It's making me sick to my stomach. And it's like, I don't have a choice. And it's not like I'm buying anything lavish. I'm getting ground beef. I'm not getting lobster or filet mignon. I'm getting ground beef. And it's still costing me $7 a pound when it used to cost me $4. You know, that's how you know it's bad, when Costco stuff is expensive.
Costco stuff is expensive, and you know, we make pretty good money. So when I'm grocery shopping, I'm feeling the pain. I'm like, man, I can only imagine two people that are probably a little bit lower income, lower class, like how much more they're impacted. And I wouldn't be surprised if the majority of the individuals, like they probably make up that large percentage of the $16 trillion that are currently in debt right now. Yeah.
I mean, you think about it, right? So look at our checks that we take home because we both do really well. You know, we both have spouses that do well as well. You got to like anticipate what's the dual income with 2 or 3 kids for one of the average folks that works in a distribution center. That's like what I think about, that's making $26-27 an hour at the cap. That's crazy. Yeah. Like, how do you sustain a lifestyle like that?
You know, what's crazy when I was reading through it as well is that they're forecasting that 43% of the Americans, they're going to continue to increase that debt within the next 6 months. So it's not stopping here. It's only going to get worse, which is truly unfortunate, right?
I wonder what does that lead to? Does that lead to like defaults in car loans and mortgage loans and stuff like that? Like, or people getting evicted from their apartments?
You know, what's crazy is what they were talking about was that the leading cause of delinquency right now is student loan debt over credit card debt.
Wow.
Which I thought it was going to be the opposite, right? But during COVID, during 2020, again, there was a lot of relief programs out there, regardless of what side you stand on. Ultimately, the facts are the facts, which is people got used to not having to pay whatever that amount was for the student loans. So instead of probably people saving some of that money, they're probably spending it on other things. Now, that's probably some Americans. What I also found interesting was that they shared that during 2020, $83 billion was paid off in credit card debt. So there were people out there that took advantage of not having to pay their student loan debt and apply it to the credit card debt, which makes sense, right? So now if you're seeing a delinquency in student loans and not credit card debt, that means a good chunk of Americans during COVID, during 2020, was focused on paying off that debt.
So are you saying that like there might have been a fugazi afoot, you know, where it's like, I didn't have to pay my student loan, so I don't, but then that student loan's like, let's say it's like, I don't know, $250 a month. That $250 a month, I'm going to paying down my credit card debt, which is a good choice. If you don't have to pay it, don't. But now both loans are there. You have the student loan that's back and you have to pay it. And then you probably haven't really adjusted your lifestyle because you haven't been forced to. So do you think that's what's happening?
Oh, yeah. I wouldn't be surprised, right? I'm pretty sure that that's what's happening right now and what we're seeing. The other piece that I found interesting was that there's, in terms of financing, right? So there was a period of time when COVID happened where you weren't selling any cars. There are so many cars out there. I think like a Subaru was offering like 0% interest for 6 or 7 years just to get the cars on the lot. Now, within a couple of months, that all completely switched. Then it was very difficult for you to even find a car. And they were showing some data there where now 6-year loans or 6-year financing is becoming more common than 5-year loans for financing a vehicle. So because of that, you're paying more for your car, right? Because supply and demand, you're paying more. Because you're paying more and you're extending the life of your loan, you're also paying more in interest. So your car costs a lot more overall within those 6 years. And then lastly, what I found staggering was that the monthly cost right now for a new car on average is $702 a month.
Jeez.
$702 a month. I mean, I'd pay that for a 4Runner, I ain't gonna lie, but I'm not gonna do it. Like, that is an insane amount of money that we're spending on cars.
Is that like including gas, maintenance, everything? Is that just like the car, the interest, and the insurance to hold it?
Just a new car payment.
Oh my God.
To your point, gas, insurance, heck, even my apartment complex, I have to pay $175 to store a car in a park. Like, it doesn't take into account the other things that go along with owning a vehicle. So yeah, just insane numbers.
That's crazy, man.
Yeah. The other piece that I read was, so 72% of that debt is related to housing expenses, not much of a surprise, right? We talk about previous episodes, like the majority of your take-home income ends up going towards housing expenses. And the rest of non-housing debt is kind of split up to between like 35% is student loans and 33% is about auto loans as well. So yeah, so some pretty interesting article that I read and some interesting facts there.
So how does one try to avoid rising credit card debt? I would say that's probably the thing. I imagine I'm like reading into the mind of X, which is like not my place. You're too smart for me. But what is one person? Is that where you want to go? What does one person do to like solve the credit card debt?
Oh, look at you! I thought you were going to go with an insult there, not a compliment. So
no, dude, I love you, man. I would never.
So kudos to you.
Wait until camera.
Wait until we hit like stop record, then it's going to really come. Like
yeah,
what I really wanted to say was. No, so there's a few recommendations and suggestions out there, right? And I'll preface this with saying that this does not apply to everybody. It doesn't work for everyone the same way. These are some of the things that works for me. It does not mean it's going to work for you. So take this with a grain of salt. In terms of credit card debt, one, it's always better to pay more than minimum payment. If you're paying the minimum payment, the majority of that's probably going to interest, not a whole lot of principal. So you're just paying that over time. The other piece is, at some point, if you're not that disciplined with credit cards, you might have to put it down and start using your debit card. Why? Because you're probably going to start reacting differently when you see your checking account start going down every day. And you're probably going to hold yourself a little bit more accountable, knowing that your actual money is now being used versus this theoretical money that you have within the credit card. And
I swear sorry, I just want to jump in on that, man. I swear credit cards do this shit on purpose where like you charge something and it doesn't hit for like 2 or 3 days. So it's like, I don't even know that I spent it. Yet when I swipe my debit card, my Citibank shows like pending transaction, like as soon as I'm done in and out swiping that thing. And so I like kind of forget. I'm like, oh shit, I did spend $300 on a backyard patio. It's
annoying because I'm getting the habit of every week just reviewing my finances and making sure I'm paying things off. And sometimes I can't even pay it off because it hasn't really, like it's still like I said, pending. So I'm like, okay, I'll just go ahead and do it next week. But again, if you're not disciplined, then are you going to do it next week or then the following week? Some other strategies that people use is one, consolidating your debt, right? So in terms of either getting a private loan or personal loan to consolidate your debt, and also balance transfers for credit cards. So I'll say with the caveat is, one, you always want to make sure that the interest rate that you're paying on that loan and the credit card is lower than what you are paying right now. If it's the same or is it more, not worth it. Obviously, doesn't make sense mathematically. The other piece to look out for is if you are using these strategies, which could be very helpful, but also double-edged sword. If you're not disciplined, you will easily find yourself in the same position a couple months from now. What do I mean? Let's say you have $20,000 worth of credit card debt. All right, you're going to go ahead and transfer that over to 0% APR for the next 12 months. Sweet, you're not paying any interest on it. Guess what? If you're not disciplined, then you're going to add more money to that credit card that you really transferred out of. So next thing you know, a year from now, you have this, maybe you're down to like maybe $19,000 in debt in your 0% interest, and then you're back to like maybe $10,000 with the credit card. So it can be one of those things where if you're not disciplined, it can definitely bite you in the ass.
Yeah, when I was like 22, 23, and I had that job at our company, I was really making a decent amount, and I couldn't really like control my spending with the credit card because I would forget how much I had put in the swipes, and it just kind of like a lifestyle thing. So I actually forced myself to use my debit card. And I know like points wise, it probably wasn't the most efficient, but that allowed me to make sure I never carried a balance because I haven't carried a balance on a credit card since I was like 23 years old. So it's been a good 7 years, almost a decade. I don't even know what like APRs are right now on credit cards, but I know they're 20+%, right?
Yeah, on a good credit card, you're probably seeing like 15% right now, anywhere between like 22%. So yeah, it's pretty high up there right now.
Damn, and that's monthly APR, so you're paying that over and over and over again. So it's like so difficult to climb out of the hole because a quarter of what you're going to is going to go to that total amount. That's nuts.
Yeah. And
how are the minimum payments so low then? Because like I see minimum payments like $25. I'm like, how is that possible? It doesn't even cover the interest. So they're just compounding the interest on you over and over again. Jesus.
Yep. Exactly. Because you know what? They're going to get you paying there for years and years. That's how it works. So they're not smart, but they're not smart. They're not dumb. They know what they're doing.
It's like casinos. Like they wouldn't build such nice hotels if they weren't making money.
Yep. The other piece of the strategies people use is I know you've heard about this, Nick, is the avalanche pay down, right? So typically people go after like their high APR interest credit cards first. And then once they pay that off, then they pay off the next one, so on and so forth. That strategy I do like, but with one condition. And that, let's say, for example, you have 3 credit cards. And let's say one's at 20%, one's at 15%, and then the other one's like at 14%. So let's say you're paying a total of about $1,000 a month in credit card bills. So let's say you have it divided by, let's say you have 500 on the first one, 250 on the second one, and 250 on the third one. Once you pay off that high APR credit card that you're spending $500 on, when you move on to the second credit card, apply that 500 to that 250 and make it 750. Don't just go ahead and start spending that $500 elsewhere, because you're going to find yourself in the same position. It's going to take you much longer to pay off the other 2 credit cards. So what you want to do, as soon as you pay off the first one, you're already getting used to living, not having those $1,000 a month. Might as well just apply that towards the rest of your debt.
That's like one of the Dave Ramsey approaches in the Total Money Makeover. It's like the avalanche versus the snowball. Because the snowball, right, is like if I have a car loan that's like $600 a month, I have a student loan that's $200 a month, and then I have a mortgage payment that's $2,000. I go after the student loan first, then take that extra and put it on the car payment, and then take that extra. It's slower, but I was reading that some people have better reactions to that because it's like the quick wins. Because, dude, debt's like insurmountable sometimes. And so you get those quick W's and then you start feeling pretty good. Like, oh, I just paid off this bill. And then you get that little bit of juice to go through. But I think every math model I've looked at, the avalanche is faster because you're paying the highest percent APR and the largest amount total on your debt. And then you're cascading that down. So that kind of makes sense that the math work better for the other. But emotionally, people may like the snowball because it's like a freebie. It's like a little softball pitch in there.
Yep. And then kind of moving on from credit cards, right? The next thing is student loans. There's millions of Americans that have student loan debt. And this article talks about too, where, some people are struggling to be able to pay that off. And when I first graduated college, I went with an unconventional approach and I selected a 10-year plan to pay off my student loan debt. So some people thought I was a little crazy because they said I should have done it in 5 years. But what I wanted to do was I wanted to keep my payment low for those 10 years, but pay it off within 5 or 6 years. Just in case I've ever gotten in a position where I lost my job, I was financially unstable, I can still afford paying my student loans every single month versus being super aggressive within those 5 years. So who knows, maybe some of the delinquencies that we're seeing was maybe some people thought they were going to be able to pay things off in 5 years, maybe 10 years. It hasn't really worked out that way. So there are options to be able to refinance your student loans if you have them pretty high up there with interest rates. Now, the only thing I'll say is that if you have any federally backed student loans, if you ever refinance to a private loan or a different type of loan that's not federally backed, things like, forbearance for student loan debt, any programs the government offers will not be available to you because you went with essentially another lender or an actual private company to be able to fund that.
Yeah, I paid off like $17,000 of student loans 2 months before the forbearance kicked in. I was like super pissed, and then I realized I was going to pay that shit off anyway because I didn't want to have any debt to my name except the houses, so it didn't really matter for me long term.
Yeah, actually, funny enough, I actually did not pay off my student loans during those forbearance periods. I went ahead and just paid off the other debt that I had, and I was at a position where when I closed on my cabin earlier this year, they're like, hey, just to make sure like everything is good, like we need you to pay off your student loans, which was like probably like maybe $12,000 left. And I was like, man, do I have to? And they're just like, yeah, you want to go ahead and close on this. Another reason why, if you get creative with financing or you do like seller financing and other things for properties, you have to worry about lenders. So I had to go ahead and pay off that $12,000. It sucked, but hey, at least, thankfully I'm in a position where I don't have student debt anymore.
Nice.
Cool. And last piece, Nick, that I want to share is I found this really cool debt repayment calculator on Credit Karma. So what this is you input the balance that you owe on a credit card or really any type of loan. You input the interest rate and you're able to put either how much you want to pay monthly or how many months you want to have the amount paid off. And then based off that, it will tell you a number of your monthly payments that you have to make. So again, when you take a look at getting yourself out of debt, it's making sure that you make a plan, define success for yourself, establish a timeline, and also leverage that calculator just to see, hey, is this going to be a 12-month journey? Is this going to be a 24-month journey? and be patient with yourself and be disciplined. Because if you follow some of those strategies, you ultimately are going to see yourself in a much better position financially.
Yeah, I would say too, for the listeners, if you're going to utilize something like that, I would start with the months. So let's say you want to be debt free in 36 years, or sorry, 36 years, 36 months. If you want to be, okay, what does that look like? Damn, that's $1,000 a month I got to pay. I can't afford that. All right, well, let's adjust. Maybe it's 48 months and it's 750 or whatever the case may be. I would say start with the timeline to X's point, because that's going to give you the, the look down and say, okay, I know there's light at the end of the tunnel, and then I can start game planning there. Because you don't want to set unrealistic expectations for debt too, because I found when I've done that, I've been really like beating myself up because I haven't paid off something in the time that I wanted to. And then all of a sudden I'm like, fuck it. Why do I even care? It's like when you're like really diligent with your diet and then you like have one like handful of fries. You're like, fuck, who cares? Let's go to McDonald's. Like you don't want to throw, what is it the saying? Don't throw the bathwater away with the baby, or baby with the bathwater is probably the right way to say it.
Whoa.
Yeah, you don't want to like set yourself up for failure from the jump. I think that's important.
Yeah. The last piece that I'll throw out there for our listeners is, I know the couple of episodes we're talking a lot about real estate, how to acquire properties, and how right now it's a good time to buy because interest rates are high. Therefore, your competition is less. If you're struggling to manage your finances, if you don't really have a good amount of savings, money saved up, it's not the time to buy. Like, you should not be looking at investing right now if you don't have a solid, at least emergency funds, at least a majority of debt paid off. Because what's going to end up happening, even if you do qualify for a home, you might end up in a position where, things to go south, one capex expense, tenants don't pay for it. It takes you 2 months to get someone in there. Like, you can find yourself in a much difficult position a year from now than you were if you didn't acquire that property.
Yeah, you get a $3,500 tankless water heater that goes out on a Sunday night.
Oh, dude, that sucks.
Yeah,
but you have 200,000 in equity to make up for it. So,
True. And Evelyn and I closed on the house. We have 4 months of reserves. I normally like to buy at 6, but we bought at 4 just because the deal was too good to walk away. 4 months is more than enough, and we can build back up to 6 pretty quickly. But yeah, you got a point, man. I call it Murphy's Law. I actually like commented on a Bigger Pockets post recently because the guy was like, yeah, I'm going to invest all my cash. I'm only going to have like $2,000 left over. I'm like, hey, it's Murphy's Law. If you have the money, nothing will go wrong. And if you don't have the money, everything will go wrong, and then you're going to be fucked. So you really don't want to be in the position where you're stressing because, dude, money, not having enough money. This is the tightest I felt with this house in San Diego and the Airbnb not getting 1,000 listings in the first week. Shocking. I probably should have metered my expectations, but dude, this is the most uncomfortable I felt financially in 2.5 years, and I don't like it. It sucks. Like this will fuck you up, man. You start making bad decisions. You start treating people differently. You start getting angry with your spouse because they're spending money on things that, like, who even cares if it's 20 or 30 bucks because, you're fine. But it's just, yeah, man, money concerns will really drive you up a wall if you're not careful.
Yeah. And there was a survey done when I was reading this article that stated that 60% of Americans cited like their reasons for financial anxiety was because of debt. So to your point, right, I can only imagine, like, financial anxiety would lead to much other things, right? It could lead to depression, anxiety about other things. So it doesn't only stop at, financial situations.
I think it's the number one leading cause of divorce amongst couples, isn't it?
Yep.
Bam.
Oh, yeah.
All right. So this Airbnb listing better make it, or else Evelyn and I ain't. All right. No, I'm just kidding. Okay. So I'm gonna switch gears here, and the only reason I want to do that is because your article and the depth we just covered is a lot better than mine, and I don't want to hear it from the listeners later. So let's just jump into what I have to say because I want to get this over with because you just crushed me, and I'm mature enough to admit that. All right, so I wanted to talk about tech layoffs, and specifically layoffs in general. What happens in these recessions when this happens? We have a show that's W-2 investor friendly. And a lot of W-2 investors wouldn't be able to be W-2 investors if they are let go from their W-2. There's been a lot of really scary information passing around in the news. So I wanted to kind of summarize what I read through in this article that I read on the Hill that was about all these tech companies laying off. So I'm going to go through a couple numbers for you guys. So Meta laid off 11,000 people, or plans to, and their stock is down 66% since the start of 2022. And that is 13% of their total workforce. Twitter, there's some thoughts around why, Elon takeover, getting rid of everybody, cleaning house, whatever, but they're rumored to have around 3,700 layoffs total, which will affect about half of their headquarters staff that's working on Twitter every day. Amazon is not confirmed, but is rumored to be laying off 10,000 people, most of which will be in the device and services team, which is like more of your Alexa, your Ring cameras, things like that. Not as much in their distribution centers or in their tech area, but their stock is down 40% year to date as well. Lyft right now is going to lose 700 workers, which is about 13% of their total staff. And then they're going to go into an immediate hiring freeze. So they're not going to backfill any of these folks or move around or hire anybody back in. Stripe, the online payment software, they're 14% layoffs, which is about 1,000 people, 1,100. Salesforce, which is if you are a salesperson in the industry, you probably have heard of this. It's a sales tool that's used like a CRM kind of style and a bunch of other stuff. I don't like it very much. But anyway, their stock is down 38% year to date, and they're laying off 1,000 people. Microsoft rumored to lay off about 1,000 people, but numbers are unclear. Robinhood is going to lose 23% of their staff in the recent crypto crash. Coinbase, 18% of their staff. Cisco is going to be about 5% of their employees, which is about 4,000. So that's a lot of people. Estimations right now in the tech industry are anywhere from 50 to 70,000 people will be laid off in the next 6 months. And that's all generating based on the turndown economic climate. What I really liked about this article is they talked about, again, regardless of your political beliefs, because both Trump and Biden released stimulus into the economy. We released stimulus into the economy. And what did that make consumers do? X, just like you covered, they went and started spending more money. They started spending more on services. They started spending more on the luxury things, which had to do a lot with the tech boom that we saw. And companies grew 40, 50, 60% year over year for the last 2 years. And they're still higher than they were at the beginning of 2020, but they're significantly lower. So I think a couple of things are happening here. Number one, and we work for a Fortune 50 company, we get fat at the top quick. And what happens is you see these huge increases in revenue and income and things like that. And the corporate executives want to make sure we're continuing to do that and have a staff that's going to be able to support that growth. What happens when that growth slows down? Stock price goes down, earnings go down, the labor and the staff has to go down. So I think that's part of what is happening currently. And I think the other thing is this is what happens when we artificially, stimulate our economy. I'm a firm believer that we should have just taken our medicine at the beginning of 2020. We shut the economy down. I know it would have sucked, but we put in so much stimulus over the last 2 years into our economy. We really supercharged our engine and we ran it on a red line for too long. And now it's starting to break down. And we're seeing it across. I mean, I think that the S&P 500 index is down 52%. There's this rumored housing market crash. Interest rates are up super high. So I think these tech layoffs are part of that. The reason I wanted to talk about this, and I want to get into these 3 topics, because I think it's super important for every W-2 investor to do these things before you become an unemployed W-2 investor. If you are going to get laid off, is make sure you limit your spending. We're going to talk about house hacking and then creating multiple streams of income. So we'll get to those 3 things. But I did want to caveat this because this is not like a fear-based show. We're not trying to like post, something clickbaity that's going to freak you guys out. So you listen to us and then we tell you it's all fine like some other podcasts will. Most of these workers were unskilled. So when I say unskilled, unfortunately, it's kind of like my job, right? Like X is an engineer. He's much smarter than I am. He does all these fancy things to make conveyor systems work. I manage people. And those are the folks that are getting laid off. It's not really the software engineers at the tech companies. It's not really anyone that's got any skilled marketable labor. It's more the project managers, the administrative style of leadership. Those types of folks are getting let go. So plan accordingly. If you're listening to W2 Amigos, going to school, maybe go to school for something that's going to provide some sort of skill or value for you. But I want to talk and transition into how you should limit your spending as a W2 employee, because you never know what's going to be around the corner. And, my favorite way to limit spending is to pay yourself first. So when you get your check, so let's say you're at Facebook or Meta or whatever they're called now, and you're getting your tech salary of $250,000 a year, you should be setting up yourself with an account that immediately upon payment from your payday, 20%, 30%, whatever the number is, goes to an account that you cannot touch, because that's going to create your windfall in case anything ever happens in your life and create your reserves. What about you, X? What do you like to do to try to limit that spending?
Oh, I try to be very mindful of what exactly I'm spending money on. So after you put aside those reserves, right, take a look at your general spending habits, right? How often you're going out to eat? How often? I know people say like you're not going to be broke by buying a coffee a day. Well, you spend $8, every day for 30 days. Do the math, like that adds up. So start taking a look at some of the little expenses as well. I know that I'm going to sound like a broken record here, and people are going to be like, really? You're going to get that petty? Subscription based. How many people have Netflix, Disney Plus, all these subscription plans? So really take a look at what you're spending your money on and what you're not using. That's the biggest thing. Sometimes people will not cancel things just because they don't want to go through the hassle, but you can easily shut off a couple, maybe $100 a month by taking a look at, hey, what am I currently not using? And should I be really purchasing certain things right now during this financial climate?
So, it's funny you say you're not going to go broke on coffee. So I just did some quick math because, we're both math geeks. Let's say you spend $8 on breakfast or coffee, which is like totally doable at a Starbucks, if not a little bit more. Let's say you spend $15 at lunch while you're out, because again, that's totally doable. I could spend a lot more. And then you spend $20 on dinner, and you do that 30 days a week. That's just minimum, like fast food, Chipotle eating out. That's not anything fancy. That's $1,300 a month that you would be spending on eating out and some of the non-essentials. And if you were to prepare your meals at home, you can probably feed yourself for $5 or $6 a day. Now you're looking at $200 or $300 versus $1,300, and that could be $1,000 that you save in a month, which could cover the majority of your living expenses.
And just to add on to that, Nick, just so that listeners know that I'm applying things that we're talking about is I cut off Monsters and Red Bull. I reduced it quite a bit. I didn't cut it out completely. I was spending $80 to $100 a month on energy drinks.
Oh shit.
Yeah. And I didn't realize that until I actually went ahead and I'm just curious because my apartment complex has this vending machine downstairs. It's like $3.10 per Monster. I would go there almost every day. So $3 times 30 days in a month, $90. That would not even include, when you go to a gas station or road trip, I'm just going to go grab one Red Bull, or I'm just going to go ahead and grab this and that. Yeah. So, made the switch completely. I bought a coffee pot and just drinking coffee. That's my source of caffeine. And it's $12 for this huge thing of coffee. It's going to last me a couple of weeks. All right. You know what? I just trimmed off quite a bit of money there.
Yeah. It's funny you say that because I also think part of it is my wife and I have been doing the cutting spending over for a long time. And that's what you guys will find from us. We'll share things that we're working on. I would also suggest too, if you're trying to limit spending and you're in a household and it's you and your spouse or you and, a partner or whatever, go ahead and do a weekly money date recap and try to associate something that's going to be of value to you. So for example, my wife and I really like going to the zoo. And so what our plan is we're going to go and run our finances and do a money date at the house the day before we go to the zoo. It's kind of our entry fee to go. So it's forcing us to look at our finances because it's going to then make us look a little bit deeper into what we're spending. So kind of on that topic, my favorite thing in the world, X, do you want to take a guess at it?
Does it start with an H?
It does. And it ends with an ack, house hacking. So, I joke around a lot, and I was working recently with two clients that unfortunately didn't find themselves in a financial position to buy down in San Diego, but they were both tech workers at Qualcomm, and they were wanting to house hack. And I was like, cool, what do you guys make in salary? And they told me a combined number. It kind of left me in shock. And I think that's one of the things specifically, if you're a W-2 earner and you're making a lot of money, you can qualify for a very nice home. And what you could do is you can use that qualification on your loan to buy a house hack, whether that be a luxury house hack or you buy a home that you're going to live in and rent out a back unit, maybe on Airbnb. That's going to be great profit for you, or at least allow you to save on your expenses. My favorite model is the rent by the room, just because you can get a really nice home in a decent neighborhood, very affordable, rent out your rooms and come basically break even in Southern California and some other areas to living for free, or even just maybe slightly paying $300-400. So what I like about that is it gives you two things. It gives you an additional stream of income eventually. And then it also gives you a huge reduction in expenses. So when I used to rent my apartment in California, This was when I was 23 before I moved out to Virginia. I had a 2-bedroom that cost $2,300 a month. That's crazy. That was what? How many years ago was that? That was like 7 years ago. So now that apartment, I'm sure, is up to $2,800, and I live for free now. So that's immediate expense that I don't have to pay, which then lowers my threshold for expenses that I need to cover to keep me alive. Like that fit fire, where you're like really thinly fire. You just have just barely enough to cover bare minimum living expenses. When you house hack, you lower your expenses a ton. You're able to cover a lot more with a lot less.
Yeah, and to add on to that, you can decide what property would make the most sense for you to house hack, right? We talked to Justin, and he talked about how he had a duplex and he was doing long-term rentals, short-term rentals, mid-term rental. Like, he changed up the strategies. Just today, my girlfriend sent me a property here in Minneapolis that is a triplex. So it's a duplex in the front, a single family in the back. That is my ideal property because, one, we could technically live in a house in the back. Then two, you can do with a duplex, you can do a long-term rental strategy, then Airbnb. So there's different ways to go about it. It all doesn't have to be rent by the room. It doesn't have to be a duplex. It could be a triplex. It could be a quad. There's definitely different strategies out there to kind of meet those goals.
Yeah, and like house hacking for the most part works in every market. That's why I think it's so cool, because I just bought in San Diego, and again, full transparency of the podcast, we've had one booking. We're not having our mortgage covered immediately right now. We need to grow our business, but I'm looking at living in San Diego in North Park for worst case scenario, $3,000 a month, which is good. But here's the thing. I own a $1.45 million duplex in San Diego that I bought under market value at 7% interest. So when I refinance to lower and my home value goes up, I may have $150,000 of appreciation. Yeah, I spent $3,000 a month, but I mean, I broke even in appreciation just alone, not to mention all the other benefits. And I'm able to do that from house hacking. And if it runs really well and the business performs well, I'll be able to break even every single month before we build some additional units and things like that. So I think any market it can work. You just have to get, unique with the strategy you're doing.
This also does not include all the tax write-offs and the tax benefits you can see with having that property.
Absolutely. So I just think it's a great way to also get your feet into investing. I've told a lot of people, I think it's like investing on training wheels because it's so easy. I mean, you're in the property, you're able to manage it, you're able to do so much. You can learn and you can make mistakes. So that's what I would suggest to lower your living expenses if you can through house hacking. So the last one is to have multiple streams of income. It's really interesting. We have a really good friend of ours that was no longer with our organization. And it was funny. I was having a conversation with him, and he tells me his biggest regret in his time with us was that he did not build additional streams of income because he has to go out and find something else. And then he looked at me. He was like, what you're doing is something that I wish I could do, because right now, if I get laid off, there's a couple things that are in my favor. Number one, I don't spend a lot of money, and I could really tighten the belt if I needed to. So I'm only spending $1,000 to $1,500 a month on expenses. Number two, I house hack, so I limit my living expense. And then number three, I'm a realtor in the Southern California area, so I could go all in on that, right? There's also different things that I've learned through creating different streams of income that I can do to pick up side money. I could Instacart. I could go out and I could do resume writing, as we've talked about in previous episodes. Hell, I could even go out and Uber, right? Like there's all these different things that I've learned I can do to create that bridge income until I can find the right job that's going to pay me the right salary. And I think that's something that you should really look into if you can as an investor. How do you create those multiple streams of income?
Yeah, and I'll be honest here, and this might not be a very popular take, but you're going to have those people out there that are just very like theoretical and be like, well, we shouldn't even be in this position in the first place. You shouldn't have to have a side hustle to make ends meet. You shouldn't have to have multiple streams of income to live your life. Yes, that would all be nice. That'd be great. But guess what? We're just not in that kind of society right now. These things are needed. If one, you want to be successful, and then two, set yourself up for success. So yeah, to Nick's point, take a look at some of those options as well. If you feel like it's conducive to what you're going after, it doesn't fit what you're looking for, that's perfectly fine. It doesn't apply to everybody.
Dude, I look at opportunity cost because I had that conversation with somebody else. It's a coworker of mine. And he's like, I just don't understand why you're working so hard. Why do you care so much? Like, I don't mind my job. I want to work till I'm 65. Like, dude, I want to work for a long time too. I'm going to be bored as hell. But to me, it's like opportunity cost. Would I rather spend 30 additional hours a week in my early to late 20s and early 30s when my kids are young and I have the time and the energy to do so, to build something that's going to allow me to not have to work after the age of 40? That's 25 years I just shut down from my retirement age. Now, my plan is to retire in 5 years or be able to financially retire in 5 years. That means I'm shaving 30 years off the average retirement age. And really, I think it's almost a disservice if you're not doing that to your future self, because there's no guarantee Social Security is going to be here long term. There's no guarantee that these retirement accounts and our 401ks are going to keep the exact same way that we want them to, because it's a generally new investment strategy. And we have no idea what taxes are going to look like. Taxes are the lowest they've ever been in history. If you look back decades ago, taxes were way higher. If you look back a long time ago, taxes were really high. So it's like, is it uncommon for these 401ks to think that you might be in a 46% tax bracket by the time you're 75? Because that's 40 years from now. 40 years ago, we barely had the internet. You know what I mean? So 40 years from now, who knows what the hell's going to happen? And if you build a business or start to build things on the side, yeah, it's going to cause more work. But ultimately, it's like, what do you want? If you're totally fine kind of grinding away at the W-2 for 45 years and living out your golden years with the money you have left over, I think more power to you. But that's why I think personal finance is personal, and you should do the things that you're really looking at to make you happy. Because yeah, do I like the fact that we're recording this podcast and I got 2.5 more hours of work to do tonight? No. But am I going to enjoy going to my kid's soccer games when he's 8 and hopefully like a superstar all-star goalie like his dad was? Maybe. Yeah, I think I would enjoy that a whole lot more than being able to tell him like, no, little Johnny, I can't go to your game because I have to go to work every single day. I don't know. It's just like something I've been stewing on recently at work. So
yeah. And then also, right, it's if your why is to spend more time with your family, then why wouldn't you want to kick that off now? Like, why wouldn't you want to put in the work so you can actually enjoy that a couple of years from now? Versus you have your why, it's your family, but yet you're doing all these things. Like you waited so long to put yourself in that position. It's like, okay, like you could have got started a little bit earlier.
Well, we just dropped the episode for Omid, who's, part of the short-term management company that works with Tony J. Robinson. He does a phenomenal job getting cash on cash for investors, return, all that kind of stuff. I guarantee he made more money probably at his W-2 for the first 2 years that he ran this business, because he was making like a shitload of money in his W-2, but he was working all the time. And he's got 3 kids. And dude, that guy, like his posts make me so happy, because he's working out, which I love. He's taking care of his body. He's working on passion projects at work. And I have never seen him go a day without having some sort of interaction with his kids. And he shared that with us on the podcast. And I think that's super inspirational, because yeah, he's like into his phase of life where he could be working super hard and still grinding and be really high up there in companies, but he made the decision to do what's important for him, which was his family.
Yeah. It's funny. I just, I saw a tweet earlier today from an individual. I can't remember what account it was. And they said, like, unpopular opinion, I would rather spend more time with my family, than work on my side hustle, which I was kind of like, yes, but I think it all depends on, again, your time frame and your goals, right? Because at the end of the day, yes, you ultimately want to dedicate that time to build that side hustle, build your career so that you can enjoy that time with your kids. You find yourself in that predicament when you let so much time pass by and then you got started a little bit later, which it's okay, but it's going to be harder.
Yep. Buying shit that you don't want to impress people you don't care about. It's like the number one trap I see people getting themselves into. So, and I've fallen victim into that shit myself. So
that fucking PS5, man, I'm telling you. PS4. Yeah, no.
PS4.
Which, by the way, my girlfriend listened to our podcast when I was talking about that PS4. And she was like, oh, you talk about the PS4 that's currently in your closet right now that you refuse to sell? I'm just like, oh.
Dang, you don't even have it out, bro?
Nah, man, I don't. Which is one of the things to talk about the article. Like, maybe you should get rid of stuff you're not using and sell it.
Yeah.
Who knows? Maybe the time I record, I'll actually go ahead and put it up on Facebook Marketplace or something. So if anyone's interested in a PS4 Batman edition, just shoot.
Snap, Batman.
Send me a DM that says Batman, and we can talk about it.
Oh man. All right. So, I mean, that's all we had, guys. So we wanted to kind of, talk a little bit about some of the things that we found interesting and happening in the market recently. So please, if you enjoyed this type of content, leave us a review on whatever you are listening to our podcast on. it really helps us to know that we are on the right path for giving you guys the content that you want to have. We've had a couple listeners reach out to us recently through our different Instagram pages, which has been super exciting. We are on there, man, and we are active as hell. So hit us up. We are the W2 Amigos. We're on YouTube, we're on Instagram, and we're on TikTok. Please drop us a follow, interact with us there. We're super responsive, want to get back to you. If you want to hit up me, I'm at the Fi Family on Instagram and TikTok. And if you obviously need any help in the Southern California market looking for investment properties or regular properties, let me know, because your boy wants to make some commissions and hook you up with a good deal. What about you, X?
You guys can find me at Xavier Marin _ at Instagram and TikTok. I'm also currently right now in the market for hotels, motels, type of resorts all across the country. So if you see anything out there that you feel like might interest me, feel free to send it my way. I'd be more than happy to check it out.
Do you want a Holiday Inn? Hotel, motel, Holiday Inn. Wait, will we get copyrighted now? We get copyrighted now?
I'll just go ahead and just mute that piece out.
That's fair. All right. All right, guys. We will see you soon. W2 Amigos out.